Hello there and welcome to World News, coming to you live from Algiers on All 24 News. To the headlines. Algeria and Slovenia in complete agreement. President Tebboune praises Slovenia's brave and fair stances and pledges gas supply to the European country. Coming up as well, Libyan National Unity Government declares end of Tripoli military operation after deadly clashes leaves 6 dead. Algeria voices concern and calls for dialogue. Gaza under fire, hospital attack kills wounded as displacement camp bombed amid UN famine warning. And later on, Spanish coalition pushes for Western Sahara referendum as major unions back Palestinian and Sahrawi causes. 4 reports up next. Hello again and welcome back to the details. First off in our news, President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, said on Tuesday that Algeria and Slovenia agree on major topics, including migration, AI, space, and the environment. Following talks in Ljubljana with his Slovenian counterpart, Nataša Pirc-Musar, both leaders pledged to broaden cooperation, with President Tebboune calling their partnership a model for Europe's ties with Maghreb and African nations.
اتفاقنا كان تام في كل المواضيع انطلاقا من الهجرة غير الشرعية إلى تقدم في المياه، في الفلاحة، في الذكاء الاصطناعي، في الفضاء، في كل ما تملكه سلوفينيا من قدرات وممكن تحويلها إلى شبابنا. بالنسبة للتعاون أنا متفق مع فخامة الرئيسة أن الحجم بتاع 90 مليون دولار يعني هزيل وهزيل جدا، ولذا سنعمل في المستقبل في كل القطاعات في كل ميادين اللي الوزراء موجودين أو وزراء اللي ما التحقوش معنا ما جاوش معنا في الوفد، فالمجال مفتوح للتعامل مع جمهورية سلوفينيا الصديقة.
Meanwhile, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune praised Slovenia on Tuesday for its courageous and fair stance on Palestine, noting it became the first European nation to recognize Palestinian statehood. He urged other European countries to follow what he called this honorable move.
احنا نقدر مواقف فيما يخص القضايا الدولية. لا يسعني إلا أن أشكر مواقف جمهورية سلوفينيا، مواقف النزاهة والشجاعة بالنسبة لفلسطين. كانت أول دولة أوروبية تعترف بالدولة الفلسطينية، وهذا يشرف كثير السياسة السلوفينية، وأتمنى أن تكون القدوة لكثير من الدول.
For her part, President Nataša Pirc-Musar called Slovenia's strong relations with Algeria excellent, stating Ljubljana's readiness to broaden cooperation across existing partnership areas.
The large delegation accompanying President Tebboune, composed of ministers and business leaders, reflects the strong relationship and the shared desire for cooperation and partnership between our two countries in various fields, as well as the will to accelerate this collaboration. Our relations are not just good, but excellent. However, our trade exchanges, which remain below 100 million euros, are still below the expected level.
On the economic front, Algeria's state energy firm Sonatrach and Slovenia's Geoken inked a natural gas supply deal on Tuesday as President Abdelmajid Tebboune pledged to meet all of Slovenia's gas demands. Slovenian President Nataša Pirc-Musar affirmed her country's aim to boost imports of Algerian gas, which already fulfills around half of Slovenia's needs.
فيما يخص الغاز احنا مستعدين لكل الطلبات لسلوفينيا، والجزائر معروفة أنها في هذا الميدان بلد موثوق لا يغير مواقفه مهما كانت التغييرات اللي توقع آنيا أو مستقبلا.
Half of our gas needs are met by Algeria, and I believe this percentage will increase in the future. Areas of cooperation include renewable energy, environmental protection, agriculture, information technology, space, and the management of water resources through space technologies.
In a related story, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune was officially welcomed by Slovenian President Nataša Pirc-Musar at Congress Square in Ljubljana. The ceremony featured the national anthems of both countries and a salute from the Republican Guard. President Tebboune greeted senior Slovenian officials, while President Musar welcomed the Algerian delegation. President Tebboune also laid a wreath of flowers at the War Memorial in Congress Square, and the two leaders exchanged gifts before departing the presidential palace. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune and Slovenian Prime Minister Robert Golob presided over the signing of a joint declaration and multiple cooperation agreements in Ljubljana on Tuesday. The deals included memoranda on political and economic consultations, police cooperation, the space industry, youth and sports, and maritime transport. Additionally, a partnership agreement was signed between the Algerian Council for Economic Renewal and Slovenia's General Agency for Investment and Entrepreneurship. Earlier, President Abdelmajid Tebboune and Slovenian President Nataša Pirc-Musar led extensive talks to enhance bilateral cooperation. Turning to other news now, Libya's Unity Government Defense Ministry announced on Tuesday the conclusion of a military operation in Tripoli following overnight clashes. Security forces will maintain presence in Abu Salim district to ensure stability, the ministry stated on Facebook. Premier Abdelhamid Dbeibeh said Interior and Defense Ministries had restored security, calling the operation a decisive step against irregular groups in a post on X platform. The clashes marked the latest violence to rock the capital since 2011.
I salute the Ministries of Interior and Defense and all members of the Army and Police for the great achievement they have made in establishing security and imposing state authority in the capital. What has been achieved today confirms that the regular institutions are capable of protecting the nation and preserving the dignity of citizens. It constitutes a decisive step towards ending irregular groups and establishing the principle that there is no place in Libya except for state institutions and no authority except for the law.
Meanwhile, the Emergency Medicine and Support Center in Libya reported on Tuesday that 6 bodies had been recovered from the sites of clashes near the Abu Salim area following the stabilization of the situation. Additionally, the General Electricity Company of Libya announced the restoration of power to all areas served by the Bab al-Aziziyah power station as security conditions in the surrounding area improved. On the occasion, Algeria has reiterated its call for dialogue as the only solution to resolve differences in Libya amid renewed armed clashes in Tripoli. In a statement, the Algerian Foreign Ministry expressed concern over the violence, emphasizing the need to prioritize the Libyan people's interests over narrow calculations and condemning the loss of life and waste of resources. Switching focus to the war on Gaza, and one of the deadliest attacks occurred on the Strip on Tuesday. Occupation forces struck Nasser Hospital in southern Khan Yunis, massacring civilians, including women, children, and a journalist. This latest war crime adds to Gaza's mounting civilian death toll as occupation forces continue targeting protected medical facilities. Zara Farjani has more in this report.
Gaza's healthcare system is crumbling under Zionist relentless bombardment. Early Tuesday, occupation forces struck Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, one of the last functioning medical centers in the Strip, killing 2 patients and wounding others. Among the dead, Palestinian journalist Hassan Islih, who was being treated for injuries from a prior attack.
تم قصف المستشفى.
The hospital was bombed. I arrived not knowing whether to mourn the martyrs, treat the wounded, or reassure terrified staff. How can I protect them?
The surgical unit was obliterated. Images show mangled beds, ruined life-saving equipments.
The third floor of Nasser Medical Complex was targeted by a rocket from the brutal occupation forces. Nasser Medical Complex was targeted in a flagrant violation of all international laws and regulations. We call on world countries and international institutions to provide protection to medical staff and hospitals that provide medical care to our colleagues and loved ones. The Palestinian people and we condemn this brutal operation that the Zionist occupation forces have done.
Fellow journalist Samir al-Bouji mourned Islih's death, condemning the targeting of press and hospitals.
This is an assault on the sanctity of journalism. The vest and helmet no longer protect us. Every day we lose a colleague. Today it was Hassan Islih. May he rest in peace.
This is not isolated. The European hospital and displacement camps also face strikes as famine warnings grow under the occupation's aid blockade. The Palestinian National Council calls it a war crime, citing Geneva Convention violations. With Nasser Hospital now inoperable, Gaza's health ministry pleads for international action to shield remaining medical teams and civilians. But as bombs keep falling, hope for sanctuary fades faster than supplies.
Similarly, a Palestinian family of 3 was killed and several others injured in a Zionist airstrike on Beit Lahia, according to the Palestinian news agency. Zionist warplanes targeted tents of displaced persons in Al Amoudi area at dawn on Tuesday, killing a man, his wife, and their child. Additional injuries were reported following artillery shelling in At-Tufah and الشجاعية neighborhoods. Elsewhere in the Strip, at least 28 Palestinians were killed on Tuesday in a Zionist airstrike on the Gaza European Hospital and nearby areas in Khan Yunis, according to the Palestinian news agency. Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basil said more than 20 people are still missing in separate attacks. 4 Palestinians, including 2 children, were killed in Gaza City shelling, while 3 more, including 2 children, died from a Zionist drone strike in Al-Shuja'iyah. 2 were killed in shelling at Al-Burij and Nusayrat camps. Additionally, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported that 46 martyrs and 73 wounded arrived at hospitals in just 24 hours, bringing the death toll to 52,908 martyrs, with over 119,700 injured. Since March 18, 2,780 Palestinians have been killed by Zionist occupation and 7,680 wounded. The United Nations issued an urgent warning on Monday about a looming famine conditions in Gaza, with UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric stating that population now faces high levels of acute food insecurity. The crisis stems from the Zionist occupation's complete blockade, preventing essential supplies from entering the besieged territory.
I want to turn now to the situation in Gaza, and I can tell you that the Secretary General is indeed alarmed by the findings released today that 1 in every 5 people in Gaza is facing starvation, while the entire population is facing high levels of acute food insecurity and the risk of famine. That's what the latest snapshot produced by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System, which we know as the IPC. The Secretary General is especially alarmed by the vast majority of children in Gaza who are facing extreme food deprivation.
Moving on to another matter now, Spain's Samar coalition has urged the government to support a self-determination referendum for the Sahrawi people. According to OK Diario, coalition members, part of Pedro Sanchez's government, questioned the executive over a map published by the Spanish Meteorological Agency showing Morocco, including occupied Western Sahara. The coalition condemned this as support for the occupation and a breach of international law, calling on Madrid to uphold UN resolutions.
Western Sahara is the last colony on the African continent, a non-self-governing territory still awaiting the colonization. The use of an incorrect map of Morocco that includes the territory of Western Sahara is not just an isolated incident. In recent years, there have been multiple instances where such maps were used by Spanish institutions and organizations. We therefore call on our partners in the government to take concrete steps to strengthen support for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination through a referendum in accordance with the United Nations resolutions.
In a similar note, Spain's largest labor union, the Workers' Committees, doubled down on its backing of Palestinian and Sahrawi rights during its 13th conference in Madrid on Monday. Secretary General Paloma Lopez praised Sahrawi women's resilience and solidarity with workers under occupation, while Polisario Front representative Khadijatu Al-Mukhtar called for global solidarity with liberation struggles. To the topic on news story, the United States President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman inked a landmark strategic partnership agreement on Tuesday, kicking off Trump's Gulf tour with the largest single arms deal in history, a $142 billion package. Additionally, Saudi and American officials signed agreements in defense and energy, while a Saudi company pledged the $20 billion investment in AI projects in the United States.
Today we hope for investment opportunities worth $600 billion, including deals worth $300 billion that were signed during this forum. We will work in the coming months on the second phase to complete deals and raise it to $1 trillion.
And with this trip, we're adding over $1 trillion more in terms of investment into our country and buying our products. And, you know, nobody makes military equipment like us. We have the best military equipment, the best missiles, the best rockets, the best everything. Best submarines, by the way. Most lethal weapon in the world.
In a separate note, U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday the removal of sanctions on Syria during his speech at the Saudi-American Business Forum in Riyadh. The move, requested by Syria's transitional leadership, clears the way for Trump's planned meeting with Syrian officials. Trump framed the decision as creating development opportunities for Syria.
Likewise, in Syria, which has seen so much misery and death, there is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade. After discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East, I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
The White House announced that U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to reduce or eliminate tariffs on China following talks in Geneva. Trump confirmed on Monday that the United States had fully restored relations with China, and he ruled out reimposing tariffs on Chinese imports after the 90-day suspension period ends. At the Saudi-U.S. Investment Forum in Riyadh still, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed that Geneva trade talks established a mechanism to prevent U.S.-China tensions from escalating. While the Trump administration aims to decrease reliance on China in critical sectors like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors exposed as vulnerable during the pandemic, he clarified America isn't cutting economic ties entirely, just reducing strategic dependencies.
President Trump wants to rebalance the American economy back to a manufacturing economy with high precision manufacturing. I think everyone agrees, including Chinese leadership, that they need to rebalance towards more of a consumption and consumer economy.
To another global news development, as the Russia-Ukraine war grinds on, a new flashpoint emerges, the battle for peace. With Russia claiming fresh gains on the battlefield and both sides trading blame over ceasefire violations, all eyes now turn to Turkey, where high-stakes negotiations may offer a fragile path forward or deepen the divide. Yasin Erkti reports now.
On the Russia-Ukraine war front, Russia claims another victory in eastern Ukraine, seizing the town of Myrylyubovka in Donetsk and striking a Ukrainian plant producing Bogdan's self-propelled artillery systems. Moscow also accuses Kyiv of violating a 3-day ceasefire, reporting 6 civilian deaths and 23 injuries in Russia's Kursk region, caused by US-supplied HIMARS missiles. Meanwhile, all eyes now turn to Turkey, where high-stakes peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are expected to begin this Thursday, but trust remains elusive.
I'd like to remind you that we must start from the statement made by the President at night after the Victory Day celebrations. The Russian side is continuing preparations for the negotiations scheduled to take place next Thursday in Istanbul. That is all for now in this regard. We will not make any further comments at this time. Once the President deems it appropriate, we will make an announcement. At that time, we can say everything.
The Kremlin spokesperson accuses European countries of lacking neutrality and insists Russia will name its negotiating team when President Putin deems it necessary.
I once again suggest focusing on the statement made by Russian President Vladimir Putin. When we speak broadly about Europe's involvement in such a pivotal negotiation process, it is clear that since Europe fully supports Ukraine, it cannot claim to be following a neutral and balanced approach.
For his part, the Ukrainian president casts doubt on Russia's intentions but says he'll push for direct talks with Putin during his visit to Turkey.
I think that if Putin does not come and plays games again, it will be a final drop, and his demonstration that they are not ready to end the war. It will mean that all the promises, sober and clear promises made by the United States, Europe, and leaders of other countries must be delivered. Otherwise, Russia will not be forced to take any steps to any form of de-escalation. It means there will be sanctions. I can only expect strong sanctions packages by the United States against Russia.
As tensions rise, Europe lights a fuse of its own, vowing to sever Russia's gas lifeline. The German Chancellor says Russia's energy and financial sectors will be the next target if diplomacy stalls.
We also expressed this in Kiev. Sanctions against the energy supply, also against this so-called shadow fleet, which is permanently operating in the Baltic Sea with up to 300 ships, also further access to Russia's financial assets. We're determined, and I personally am determined to get this underway now with all possible vigor and with every conceivable form of cooperation within the European Union.
And in a major long-term move, the EU announces plans to cut all ties with Russian gas, vowing to block new import contracts and help companies exit existing deals without penalty. Two paths lie ahead: diplomacy in Istanbul or the battlefield's unending role. As Thursday nears, the world is holding its breath. Will peace rise from the ashes, or will the drums of war drown its voice?
Now let's catch up on more stories with Salman Aseb in the News in Brief.
Sudan's Interior Minister Khalil Pasha Sareen has ordered the swift deportation of foreigners involved in the fighting alongside the Rapid Support Forces. In a meeting with the UN, High Commissioner for Foreigners had in Khartoum has said Sudanese law allows expelling any foreigner or refugee who joined the war against the state. The NGO CARE has warned that nearly 500,000 children in Somalia risk dying from hunger due to a lack of international funding. It said that 4.6 million people could face hunger by June, with 1.8 million children under 5 already suffering from severe malnutrition, a sharp rise in just months. Pakistan's army said on Tuesday that 51 people were killed last week in clashes with India, including 11 soldiers and 40 civilians. The fighting sparked by the Kashmir dispute also left nearly 200 injured before a ceasefire was announced. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed off on the U.S. metals deal on Monday. The Ukrainian parliament confirmed via its Telegram channel that Zelensky signed a law ratifying the agreement between Ukraine and the U.S. to establish the Ukrainian-American Investments Fund.
And that's the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms. Thank you for watching and good night.